congratulations. On behalf of the Popcorn Talk Network, the online broadcast network for Movie Talk, and the Schmoes Know, you are now a member of the Jedi Alliance. May the Force be with you, always.
Hello and welcome to Jedi Alliance, the celebration of the greatest saga ever told, episode 30, as we move into a new dawn. See what I did there, boys? Star Wars puns. Yes, this is the first episode of Jedi Alliance without my beloved Maude Garrett as my co-pilot, but her memory, in essence, is here with the new addition, the Chewbacca Funko Pop, a constant reminder of Maude's wonderful presence, and she will be missed. And I want to start up top by thanking all of you for joining us today and continuing the journey here on Jedi Alliance. As I said last week, this town is big enough for several Star Wars shows, so don't be afraid. Don't feel like you have to choose sides. Maude's going to be on AMC's Jedi Council, which will be a fun show to watch, and we have Jedi Alliance here, and there's probably more Star Wars stuff coming out of this mouth soon with the help of some of my friends here in this room, so stay tuned. With me today are some special guest hosts for a very special edition. We have our guest Chris Taylor here. Take a moment to introduce you. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
The author of How Star Wars Conquered the Universe. Like good little students, we've all brought our books today.
Oh yeah. I cannot wait
to get into this. And with me in this conversation today, like I said, my guest co-hosts are from Schmoes Know, the editor-in-chief of schmoesknow.com, Mr. Mark Reilly.
Yes, hello everyone. Jedi Alliance. Chris Taylor. Oh man, I'm so excited.
Hello.
I'm so excited. Such a big fan.
Returning to the show from his, what is my personal favorite episode of Jedi Alliance is when Joseph came on and defended the prequels.
Yes.
Joseph Scrimshaw, comedian, author, writer, joining us here today as well.
I am thrilled to be here.
You are, and next week we're going to be doing the special action figure episode with Mike Black.
Yes.
Excited for that as well. There's so much to get to, and Chris, thank you so much for coming down from Northern California to be here.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I mean, the Schmoes thing was great, and now this is just the icing.
We get to celebrate some Star Wars, man.
I know. We get to go really geeky and into the depths of geekdom that we didn't quite manage on Schmoes Know. So.
Well, like any
I'm
good...
frightened now.
Any good, and also, you're from Mashable.com as well. Let's not forget your duties there. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I'm deputy editor of Mashable. For those who don't know it, it is one of the world's leading independent news websites. We're now up to about 40 million readers. We started off, covering technology and social media, kind of grew with the growth of Facebook and Twitter, but now we cover everything and anything, and now, we have reporters in Ukraine, we cover serious international news as well as really geeky stuff.
Whether that dress was white and gold or blue and black, right?
Yeah, well,
right.
I would put under the head of important international news. But,
was the internet bored that day? I just didn't understand that one. But anyways,
but you're here, and let's find out a little bit about you as a Star Wars fan.
Yes,
as we do here with our guests on Jedi Alliance, we like to ask the 5 most important Star Wars questions, and we start simple.
All right.
What was your first time?
My first time? Well, I often tell the story of how I experienced Star Wars on the back of a cereal box before I actually saw the movie, and this is absolutely true. And it took me writing this book to figure this out. I was like, reaching back into my dim and distant history. I knew that I saw it on TV the first time.
Really?
And then I, thanks to the interwebs, I discovered that it did not show on UK TV, where I grew up, until about the middle of 1982, which seems very late. I'm sure I'd seen it before that. So I started to reach further back in my mind, and I realized I'd read the comic books. Because I remember being very surprised when Princess Leia, when the stormtroopers are hunting her in that opening scene on the Tantive 4, they're hunting her and they say, there's one set for stun.
Yeah.
I will always remember expecting her to say, I've got mine set to kill, which is what she says in the comics.
Yes.
Which obviously, I don't know, taken out of some draft of the script at some point because it made her too aggressive.
Sure.
too much of a killer. But I remember expecting that. I still expect that when I watch it today.
Right. Do you say it to yourself?
Yeah. I'm like, line, Miss Fisher, line.
Well, I've talked here on this show, and it's definitely mentioned in your book with Alan Dean Foster writing the novelization, ghost writing it for Lucas. Luke's Blue 5 to me at one point.
Yeah.
I grew up going, wait, why is he Red 5 in the movie? So I totally know where you're coming from.
That was changed at the last minute. I think they had to color correct the helmets or something like that. I mean, there were all these last minute changes that just it's such a hey kids put on a show. Let's put on a show kind of story. But so the comic books must have come before that.
Yeah.
And then, maybe the action figures came before that. And I realized I traced it all the way back, and it was actually in the Star Wars Day-to-Day book that I found. The back of the cereal box called Shreddies that we had in the UK.
Nice.
They had basically the whole story of Episode 4 in like 4 different cereal boxes. So I was spoiled going in. I mean,
That's the original spoiler.
The
right
original
there.
spoilers, but we didn't
Shreddies.
have spoilers in those days. We just, you were lucky if you got the story of the movie before.
They were whispers on the street.
But you were desperate for anything. You take the story in any format.
Yeah.
So that was back of the cereal box in 1978, sort of the first time actually viewing it. British TV 1982, and I still am confused when there's no commercial break after the double sunset.
I grew up, I had seen it, but I grew up with a VHS copy that my dad had made. And when Leia's about to get the probe droid with the needle comes in, commercial.
I was just going to say, that's exactly how I remember it as well. Because I think my dad, too, did a bootleg copy at one point that I wore out.
First time on network television. Commercial.
Yeah.
You want to ask him that one there?
Oh, yeah. And what is your favorite film of the prequels? No, in general, all of them.
The prequels. And
it could be a prequel. They do say on here it could be a prequel. I don't know if anybody's ever had a favorite from the prequels, but
I'm sure it's happened. It's not going to happen this time. Again, this has been changed by the experience of writing the book. I used to say, the cool kid's answer, which is Empire.
Of course.
Right. But the writing this book and just delving so deeply into the making of Episode 4 gave me such respect for what was done there, and the accomplishment, the fact that this film still holds up all these years later, and it was this film that was budgeted at $8 million, ended up at 11. And they were able to make it look the way they did, and it was edited the way it was edited. Yeah. And it still holds up as part of the series. I just have so much respect for that that I have to name Episode 4 as my favorite.
I totally accept that answer. And it's when you think about John Dykstra and his crew and Van Nuys, they're not too far from here, and how they pulled that stuff into what it looked even in 77. Forget special editions, but how it looked in 77, it's quite an accomplishment.
And apparently they were struggling against the smell of elephant dung.
Oh, wow.
They had the bantha costume was laying around, and apparently the whole place smelled like a really bad unwashed elephant.
Wow, that's an amazing association. That someone out there has the association. What do you think of with Star Wars? Sort of elephant waste is what I think of. The twin suns and elephant waste.
Bantha poodoo.
So the next question is, who is your favorite Star Wars character?
Again, changed by writing the book.
I like that, though. That means this book took you on your own journey.
It took me on so many journeys simultaneously. I feel like I had to pin the map many times to figure out where I was. But it became R2 because, one thing that becomes clear in studying all 6 movies really deeply and what Lucas has said about them is that R2 is actually the hero.
Yeah.
And that, he never puts a foot wrong. He's always in the right place at the right time. He saves everyone. All of the characters are saved by R2 at one point or another.
Yep.
And Lucas has said, I think he said on the Revenge of the Sith, if not elsewhere on the set, he told various crew members that the whole story of Star Wars is being told to the Keeper of the Journal of the Wills 100 years later by R2-D2.
I love that.
Which is, just a wonderful spin to put on it all. And also suggests that R2 is maybe kind of embellishing the whole story.
And maybe that's why there's some weird changes or something, like, those little kind of plot holes we fans love to crawl into that maybe just R2.
It just R2 isn't that good a writer.
Yeah, it's the best explanation of the rockets suddenly appearing.
Yeah, it's like, I had these rockets.
Yeah, I forgot. I got rockets. Did I tell you I can fly? I can fly. It's really cool.
I could in the old days. I can't anymore.
I love that concept. That's a great answer, because we've talked about how Lucas says sometimes it's the story told from the droid's point of view and everything, but to actually attach it to the Journal of the Whills, which for, again, fans going to the novelization of Star Wars, which came out, as again, I read as a kid, there's a preface in there taken from the Journal of the Whills.
Yes.
So most of the 80s, I, as an uninformed kid, all this information wasn't available. I would scour any library I could find looking for this Star Wars book, the Journal of the Whills.
Yeah, what do you mean you don't have the Journal of the Whills? Can I put it on back of it?
It's right here. It talks about Palpatine being surrounded by people who corrupted his power. It's not there. So
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's the same feeling you get if you read the end of the Narnia books. You get all the way to the end. It talks about, all of their adventures so far were just page one on this vast, huge book.
Where is it?
And you're like, hey, wait a minute. That's a cop-out.
Yeah.
Give me that larger book.
It'd be awesome if Episode 7 had a reference to Journal of the Whills. Could we? No?
I would love that.
Is that too nerdy?
No, I mean, I'm wondering if JJ is going to, take that torch, carry it on, and put the droids kind of in that, original trilogy spin, because you say R2 is a little foggy when it comes to some of the prequels in my mind, because he's sometimes not there. but I don't know.
But then his opening scene, he saves Amidala and her crew.
That's
my
my favorite part of Phantom Menace, actually.
What was your answer before this journey changed you?
Well, I was a Luke kid.
Yeah, that was me.
And I probably, I definitely went through a Han teenage phase.
Yeah. I'm still in that phase. Star Wars is so quotable. We always ask, what are your favorite quotes or quote, and how do you come about using it in your daily life?
Gosh, well, I have a verbal tick where I use the word try way too much, so I always have to go back to, do or do not. There is no try.
Yeah.
And my wife actually had that framed above my writing desk while I was writing the book. But what I really love is that they've taken that quote and run with it in Rebels.
Yeah.
We had that great scene where Kanan is like, "Hey, wait a minute, that doesn't actually make any sense."
Yeah, what is that exactly? Yeah.
Ezra's like, "Wait, but if you can't you actually make an effort towards something?" I was like, yeah.
Like Yoda just taking his force powers and just being able to pull. I mean, God, that's my favorite scene in Empire. So it was him lifting the X-wing out, which I think is nicely going into, if you had a force power,
yes,
what would it be?
Oh, well, it has to be the these are not the droids you're looking for.
That was mine.
Mind trick?
Yeah. Which, just the ability to change the minds of the weak-willed. I can't remember exactly how he puts it, but that ability to get past any guards, get into any building in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've seen the movie The Paper, all you need is a clipboard.
And I love what happened on last week's episode where they were saying like Roger could be a sexual predator if he used the Force Jedi mind trick.
Actually went down that road last week.
It went down that road. I'm like, no. I mean, I would use it for like, and it kind of, I think Maddie then went into it a little bit like, no, I would like to be upgraded to first class, just get some
I think
free swag.
People think of it as too official. I think people would just use it to win fights. Like at a party. Like, I really don't want to disagree with you, so.
Yeah. Or get free stuff. I mean, you don't need to see my credit card.
Yeah, exactly.
I've always wondered, why don't they notice this bit? It's like, are they just not seeing
it?
That
sounds like,
Why is this old dude waving at me? I don't know.
What is this about? And why does a Jedi need to do that anyway?
Yeah.
It's part of it.
And I love that probably just came out of Alec Guinness. Just sort of doing. I was
going to say, it might have been just a little tick,
it's very sort of old actorly, sort of. Yes. It's very stagecrafty.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to think that there are like bigger gestures if you have to try harder. So like he has to go like full jazz hands.
You don't need to see my definition.
Exactly.
The final official question before we throw some bonuses is, Mr. Taylor, would you turn to the dark side of the Force?
I would say it depends what's on offer. I mean, if
Cookies have been thrown out there in society.
We have cookies. Casual Fridays.
if what's on offer is I get turned into a half machine who sort of stomps around and can't do very good lightsaber fights, and eventually gets and you constantly have to look over your shoulder at the boss who's irritated because you haven't turned your son to the dark side yet, then no thanks. But if it's sort of if I get to look cool and dance around like Ray Park, then
and wear a cool cape. Who doesn't like wearing a cool cape? I don't want a Jedi cloak. I want a cape that flows.
Absolutely.
No capes.
No capes.
No capes. No capes.
Incredibles.
No capes.
So yours is situational, and that's a realistic answer on it. I started on the dark side, and I'd have to be turned to the light. But
I feel like I'd have to have a long informational interview with Palpatine. Just have to sit down and go over the benefits plan.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's like, what are you offering? Is there health care? Is there
401k?
Do I have an American Express expense account? Like, what are we talking here?
There's also just a lot of social time with Palpatine himself. I imagine that Vader is just hanging out, just chatting.
And there's only two of you, so it's like I always said no because
long road.
I like to feel like I'm a good man and I would follow the Jedi ways. But I also feel like you have more friends. You actually have friends. So
I can see it. That's a good point. Sit down. Come here, boy. Let me show you the benefits package. Take a look. Bonus question we've been throwing at our guests lately. What is your favorite Star Wars sound effect?
I'm with Simon Pegg on this one. I love the mouse droid.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's a good one. We've never had that answer yet.
That's a great one. That's a great one, yeah. I didn't get to answer that one when I came on. Can I say lightsaber? Just throw it out there. Because
and I don't think you did too. So what's your favorite one?
I'd say doors closing. I like doors closing.
Really?
Joseph likes the simple things in life.
I do. Because it's Star Wars basically saying to Star Trek, calm down. The doors shouldn't be that loud.
Open the blast doors. Open the blast doors.
Exactly.
Oh, I love it. Well, that is getting to know Chris Taylor as a Star Wars fan, which is clear in this book. But like any good journalist, you kind of, you kept yourself, not a lot of me's and I's in this book. There's a lot of we's as fans. So it's nice to get to know you as a Star Wars fan here who uncovered this. Before we dive deep into how Star Wars conquered the universe, I did want to take a moment to discuss with you guys here the finale of Star Wars Rebels. A lot of fans have been asking about it and want to get our take on it. They know from, if you've watched this show from the beginning, I've always been a little wishy-washy on Rebels. Loved a lot of things of it. I trust the people behind it. Filoni, I think, has absolutely got a handle on the universe. Kinberg has got a track record. I just didn't fully grasp it. You came on and kind of explained it for me.
Yeah.
Which is your take on it was?
It was a lot from Chris's book of it really made me appreciate George Lucas as a human and see him kind of as an auteur, almost like a David Lynch figure where he's sort of like, I'm never going to agree with everything, but I appreciate that all this weirdness is coming from you as a human being. And it made me really enjoy the prequels more because it's just the perspective of a weird human being.
Yeah.
So then to go right from your book and those thoughts to the first Disney product that felt like a product where they were hitting all the notes but not making the music. And every once in a while it does feel like it's been a little while since we do something that we know you people really like.
Right.
So here are two sons. You like those, right? Every once in a while it feels a little fan servicey. But I agree that it is moving away from that and just feeling like its own thing.
Right, and you've kind of had the same take too.
I haven't fully gotten on board. I am definitely into it. I see the progression. It's getting better. I trust everyone behind it. I do love the nods, but I'm with you, Joseph, on the fact that it's like sometimes the fan service is coming at me and it's a little too much, even for this geeky fan where I love the music and I love the callbacks to Yoda's like do or do not. What does that mean? I like all that, but I still feel like it's still trying to find its what is it? Je ne sais quoi, I guess.
And it might have. Where are you coming in? Where were you coming in on it?
I'm ambivalent. I mean, I liked where it was going at the end, and I loved the opening episode. I mean, seeing that at Comic-Con was spectacular. And I love that they were able to get everything in. I didn't feel it was fan servicey to get TIE fighters and speeder bikes and and stormtroopers, just everything that you could get into the packet the first 10 minutes to signal that this is the Star Wars you remember.
That's what I loved about it. Yeah,
it actually worked, and that takes something to pull that off. I mean, even getting a Wilhelm scream in the first episode, that was pretty spectacular. I think the problem came sort of, it had a bit of a mid-season slump. There was. It just there would occasionally be a time where a character's just sort of standing against a textured wall, and you can sort of feel the cheapness of it a little bit. Or the standing in the grass in Lothal was kind of very kind of. We're just going to cut some corners here. We're going to save some money. We're not going to animate that grass the way that it might have been animated lovingly for 3 hours on Clone Wars. So it felt a little bit cheap, but. And a little bit slow moving, and I could never get over the jeopardy problem. This is the thing: if you're going to have stormtroopers blasting at you, or the Inquisitor, with his rapier-like sword actions, very
spinny
ineffectual.
Sword, I call it.
His spinny sword. But I love the way that he would tuck one hand behind his back. He would do it. It's like, I'm going to be a proper fencing champion. But no one ever dies from that. No one ever really gets injured. All the stormtroopers. I just want one of them to take their helmet off and be like, "Hey, wait a minute."
Even in the finale, and we're gonna and so a slight spoiler, Mod Kermit spoiler arms waved here. We'll talk about the finale here in a little more detail in a second. But even in the finale, there was the stormtrooper thing. It's almost become this. It is, for Star Wars fan, a running joke. Stormtroopers don't hit what they hit. But I said in the pilot, and I've said now in the finale, it's too much.
Yeah.
It's glaring. It jumps out at me when 7 stormtroopers can't hit Sabine and she's waving at them.
Yeah. And stormtroopers are killed in this show, right?
Yeah.
By the dozen.
All the way through,
And that is not really explored. It always happens off screen. I mean, I know there's no blood in Star Wars. I get that. That's sort of part of the aesthetic. And we don't talk about the genocide that was the destruction of the Death Star. We don't talk about the construction workers that died on the second Death Star. I get that. But it just sort of feels like, we're a little bit more mature as a culture now. Maybe we can explore the sort of the costs of war a little bit more, and that was very much what Clone Wars was about, right? It was looking at the ambivalent sides, and really that was a war that was was duplicitous from the very start, and it very much explores that. Here, we're back to the good versus evil, and it's very straightforward that we hiss at the stormtroopers, and we're happy when they die. By the dozen, and leaving their families and their children as orphans.
It's right. Always there's some reality that we skip over, but in this episode, I will say where it ends, and all as fans all along. We, again, spoiler, second warning. Fans all along, I think we wanted Ahsoka to show up. We probably knew at some point. Then Ashley Eckstein herself kind of spoiled it, right? For
some, if you didn't watch it that night that it was on,
in that time zone,
if like me you were watching it the next morning on iTunes, and then you just want to quickly check your email to make sure that work isn't harassing you, and then you see an email from Ashley Eckstein saying Ahsoka lives, then you might not have as great an experience of watching the episode after that.
Yeah, well, there was also news going around that I had to cover for the site, which was the woman that dubs it in French. Ahsoka's voiceover actress actually shared it on her either Facebook or Twitter. So I saw that, and everybody was like, "Oh, see, I told you she's back." I'm like, okay, well, here we go.
But we get what we want as fans. I grew to love Ahsoka Tano as one of the more compelling characters. The growth from little annoying snips to this young woman who had this kind of she was kind of the rebellion early on in my view. She kind of saw stuff was going on. She leaves. To know that she was coming back, it's a comforting feeling, and to see where for me where this episode ends, season 2 is going to be less about Ezra learning to be a Jedi, and now it's more about these rebels and these cells starting to form together, and I can get behind that, and that's worth the journey for me.
Me too.
Yeah. We were just saying beforehand that it sort of felt a little Battlestar Galactica-ish when suddenly all those ships appear in the middle of the Star Destroyers, and you're just like, yes, I'm getting something from this. We're starting to see something build.
Yeah.
And this is wonderful. It's really living up to the promise of the title of the show.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's the first season, so it always takes some legs to find your sea legs when a first season comes around. So I've been willing to give it a pass.
And that's a good point. Look, man, Seinfeld would not have lasted 2 episodes if it was out now.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
became one of the greatest.
Exactly.
We have a quick, get it, now.
It has to be perfect, just like Clone
we want
Wars
to binge
was.
watch. I watched all 13 episodes of Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt yesterday because I want it all at once.
Yeah.
We don't let the shows grow, so this was a good lesson for me as a fan to kind of pump the brakes a little bit and watch it grow. Where were you at on this episode, Joseph?
I really liked it because I enjoyed that the rebels were coming in, and I also felt like there was a little bit more character work, and I think that was one of the things I didn't like in sort of the mid-season slump, of that we spent so much time with Kanan and Ezra that all the other characters just started to really become background, and I felt like there was like a little bit more hint of like the depth of Hera. Like, I just wanted to know those characters a little bit better. In Clone Wars, we had the benefit of already knowing some of the characters, but they did such a good job of developing, individual clones, and Ahsoka herself, and you got invested in the characters, and that's some of the challenge of Rebels, is that I'm not invested in the characters. They're a little generic still right now because I don't know enough about them. And the conclusion really suggested that I'm going to get to know exactly why Sabine has that armor and all that kind of stuff in.
I want to know, man.
season.
Sabine's an interesting character. I've mentioned it before. Why was she drawing Cad Bane in that first episode? She was drawing Cad Bane. I want to know. There's so much there, and even Chopper the Fartbot. I've grown to love him.
I
like him. Yeah, he's great.
He's got some personality.
He had some calm moments, like he had taken his medicine for this episode, and he calmed down just a little bit, and I really like that.
I was sad to see the Inquisitor go. I'd say though.
Great point.
If that is indeed the end of the Inquisitor, but Star Wars does suggest to us historically that when you fall down a shaft that deep and we don't see you,
it could mean anything, really.
Yeah,
I mean, I know they kind of, they did it with Clone Wars, obviously with Darth Maul, which that was pretty final in my mind. He wasn't just falling; he was in half.
And it worked for me with Maul when I thought it didn't. When I first heard what they were doing, I was like, "Oh, come on, just let him go. Put him some robot legs now." And I actually liked it. I thought it worked with Maul. I think it was Filoni that kind of said, "No, Inquisitor's dead. He served his purpose." But
it's sort of it was more Emperor-like, is what I was thinking of. There was something of an explosion at the bottom where you're like, "Oh no, he's gone now. Now he's pancake."
And I loved the fight. Great lightsaber fight, I thought, at the end, and really Kanan from New Dawn, which I'm on record saying, obviously fans kind of give me some crap. I'm not a fan of that novel, but I am a fan of everything Kanan so far. I liked him in that novel as kind of the drunk former hidden Jedi. I liked him here. I think Freddie Prinze Jr. is doing a great job voicing that character. It's not easy to do, and that new comic series comes out next month, which is Kanan the Last Padawan. This guy's got an interesting story. He's a little bit
absolutely.
I'd love to hear more of it, though. I mean, I'd love to know what the stakes are for him. Other than training Ezra. I mean, is it just all about redeeming his own childhood through the training of Ezra, or what about him and Hera? What's the relationship there? It'd be good to have a little more sort of Firefly-esque potential action there. Just something that's in stake among the crew. It just feels very static at the moment.
So all in all these old men who are watching a kids show, we think it's going to be okay, which is sometimes I have to remind myself too. I am watching a cartoon on Disney XD.
I know, and we just talked at length about it, and I'm 40.
But hey, they're doing a good job with it.
It is great to watch it live because the commercials will remind you what you are watching and who it is made for. So I turned to my wife and like, I actually have some very serious opinions about smash a go-gurt. I'm like, okay. This is for people who want to smash a go-gurt
Nerf
on some level.
That's a good point. My God.
The great thing about Star Wars, though, is it does work on multiple levels at its best.
It does. So, speaking of that, it is time to get to the meat and potatoes of today, of the new segment. Now, this is a segment that Maude Garrett herself actually named before we even started this show. Trivia question, trivia answer. Maude and I were given this show to create, and we created everything inside the framework of the show, but Popcorn Talk and Schmoes and Phil and Kevin and behind the scenes, everyone said, hey, we're going to give you the show. It's called Jedi Alliance. We actually fought and campaigned pretty hard to name the show Inside the Taun-Taun's Belly. It was rejected outright. But Maud and I always held on to that name, and we said, if we ever get a guest where we know we're going to have an in-depth interview, we shall call that segment, like we will today, Inside the Taun-Taun's Belly. So, we're going to go.
With no sound cue? I was waiting for something.
The sound of a
I thought they smell bad on the outside.
So with that, our first segment in honor of my former co-pilot, Maude Garrett, is Chris Taylor, as we said, is here to talk about his excellent book, How Star Wars Conquered the Universe, the Past, Present, and Future of a Multi-Billion-Dollar Franchise. One day, I was here producing the Marvel Movie News show, and I just met this guy at Kamikaze, Joseph Scrimshaw, very funny, very talented author. You all should get to know him and follow him. And we were chatting. I said there was this thing I saw on the internet, which turned out to be from Mashable. Something scrolled on my Facebook page, and it was it was an interview with Gary Kurtz, and you don't hear a lot about Gary Kurtz. And he's like, idiot, it's from this book called How Star Wars Conquered the Universe. And I went, I had this book mailed to me that night coming out, and I whipped through it. I told this man about it. I told Christian. I told Mark Ellis. I even told Alicia Malone from Schmoes. So I said, I know you're not a Star Wars fan, but there's a lot of film history in here. And I emailed you, like, thanks for giving me the insight. And through Twitter, through the magic of Twitter, we get the author here, Chris Taylor. And I don't even know where to begin.
God, I know.
Other than we talked a little bit on Thursday on Schmoes about it, but tell the fans here, how did you begin to write this book?
It all went back to the sale of Lucasfilm to Disney and the realization that was sort of an end of an era and a perfect time for a single one-volume history of the whole Star Wars franchise. You know, not just the straightforward, this is when the movies got made and this is who started them. We all know that by heart, but everything, you know, the culture around it, the fandom, how that has grown and evolved, and you know, and the business and culture of it as well. So it turned out there was a gap for a book like that.
Surprisingly,
surprisingly, I know. Well, you know, much of the history of Star Wars has been controlled by Lucasfilm. True. Which has its benefits, but it also means that the corporation that made the movies is controlling the history of the movies, which I don't really. It's unprecedented, really, in any other respect. I mean, you know, Paramount may have kept a tight lock on Star Wars and Star Trek in many ways, right. But it you know, it was really the fans that drove the culture around it and the history of it. So so that was, you know, that was all swirling around. That was how I was able to sell the book to many different publishers, and the one that I eventually went with was Basic Books. And then it was just 2 years of sheer terror and flying around the world and you know, going to Star Tours in Tokyo to sort of see the schoolgirls, and they are mostly schoolgirls in Tokyo who line up for Star Tours, oddly enough, and just tried to gather as many stories as possible to explain, you know, to future generations. You know, I want this to be something you put in a time capsule and sort of explain why this franchise took over our minds, you know, at the end of the 20th century and going into the 21st. And
it really did take over our minds. We were talking before, my favorite character of all time in cinema is Indiana Jones. But I don't feel the same way about the Indiana Jones movies as I do with Star Wars. I get lost in this world. Mythology is one thing.
Yeah, the mythology, I think, is just kind of... It hits everybody, whether you're a Han Solo or a Luke or the hero's journey. I know that's Joseph Campbell, which you talked about, which was so great in that, which I love, is George Lucas's kind of template was the hero's journey. But I think it hits what for me really was going into the beginning of the book, which I didn't think about because I'm such a diehard fan, but that you could say Death Star or Darth Vader or Wookiee, and to people who have never seen it and they know what you're talking about. And that to me was interesting.
So many parents have come up to me when I said I was writing this book, and they were like, my kid knows every character's name. I haven't shown them the movies yet. How are they getting this knowledge? They're just absorbing it by osmosis somehow.
Yeah, it's just in the conversation. And even, you know, you say the biggest spoiler of them all is Darth Vader, Luke's father. So, but people know it now, they don't even bat an eye.
Everyone knows it. And actually, I mean, you know, in that sense, the origin of the book goes back even further beyond, further back in time, before the sale to Disney. And that is, in 2012, we discovered that one of our features writers had not seen the original movie.
I love this.
And we decided, we were sort of, after we picked ourselves up off the floor, we were like, we've got to live blog this. We've got to show her this movie in real time, have people tweeting about it. We set up a Twitter account that could sort of take you through the movie even if you weren't watching it, so you'd understand where she was at. And she starts saying things like, "Oh, this is all really familiar," "Oh, droids. Oh, that's where the phone comes from."
See, that's
And the R2D2 was a to her was a Pepsi cooler.
Yeah,
at school.
I was just gonna say. Yeah.
And Darth Vader. Oh, that's a tall version of the kid from the VW commercial.
Right.
Wow.
Which just like, no, that's not. But you're missing. But this is how an average casual fan might run into it. And she knew the spoiler. She'd never seen it. Barely knew anything about it.
Just live with it.
Yeah.
So I started to replicate that process. I actually did a screening for May the 4th in 2013 with Change.org, and Lucasfilm got involved, and we tried to find as many technical newbies as we could. And we just discovered that they all have a tremendous amount of spoilers that they wouldn't have for any other franchise already in their heads.
Just floating around.
Yeah. They just, I mean, and I mentioned this briefly in the book, but I went to this Facebook talk that they do. They often do talks with journalists where they sort of explain what they've changed this week. And this one was about the news feed. And it was all about, let's explain our algorithm by means of, let's say Yoda has a Facebook account, and Darth Vader has a Facebook account, and Luke has a Facebook account. And it was basically revealing the relationships between all the characters. And everyone's just sort of sitting there in the room like, yeah, whatever. But if you could imagine a Facebook briefing where they give away, the ending of Harry Potter.
Yeah.
What happens to Dumbledore at the end of the final book.
Right.
People go nuts. You're like, hey, wait a minute. But Star Wars is just fine. So, that really intrigued me about what is different about this thing. Why did it take off? Why did it cross that barrier that normally lies around really geeky franchises?
Yeah.
And made it into the mainstream. What was it about it that did that?
You found it.
And it's a little bit about the mythology. I mean, Hero's Journey didn't really come in as a template for Lucas until
it was after
later in the day. I mean, he sort of, he was reading other stuff.
It's one of the things I loved about this book, and when I continue to sell it to fans, and I will continue now. You mentioned it earlier. If you've been a fan long enough, like we have, you just start to know things. It's like me being a Beatles fan. This, then they met, then they went to the Germany. You know the stories.
Yeah.
When you were like, hey, it's a story, and I kind of looked at it, and in my head, I'm like, I'm sure I know some of the stuff. You were able to uncover some wrinkles and take some Star Wars legend of, Lucas wanted it to be Campbell. He didn't meet Campbell till 83.
Right.
All these things that you kind of were able to unveil that you think you know the story. This gives you the full picture.
Because the story has been somewhat smoothed and changed.
There's been some mythologizing,
yeah, there is the mythology of the story. I mean, Mr. Lucas does like to change the story as much as he likes to change the story in universe as well.
Yeah.
But the universe was so large to begin with. I think perhaps the essential reason why it did cross that barrier is in the first 10 words. It's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And I remember thinking this as a kid. Isn't it unusual that here is a movie that quite explicitly announces at the very beginning, this has got no connection to planet Earth. You will never, ever see anything from Earth crop up in this. There is no way, shape, or form that you can possibly do it.
Yeah.
And I know a few Star Wars Tales comics have managed it. It's about the only time.
Indiana Finding Han.
Yeah, exactly.
Still mad about the hot chocolate in Heir to the Empire, which I think you mentioned. I was like, yes,
the
thank
hot
you.
chocolate reference.
Timothy Zahn reference.
Poor Tim Zahn. He's like, but it's hot chocolate.
I hope Tim Zahn gets to write one of these new canon novels. That guy deserves that.
He deserves it, absolutely.
What he did with that trilogy.
He's ready. I mean, I spoke to him before Legends came in and before the expanded universe got shut down, but he was still like, I live 10 hours away from Lucasfilm, and if they want me to write another book, I'll be in the car right now.
Because, I mean, they really, and this is what I love about the book, is that not only is it about the movies, sure, but you go into the expanded universe, and I think Timothy Zahn actually saved Star Wars somewhat because there was that big period. And I'll never forget when I heard there was a book coming out that was going to take place after Return of the Jedi, and that at that point
official?
It was canon.
Yeah.
It's, so you're like, and I mean, it just started up the conversation again.
And he was able to play around with it. I mean, not as much as he wanted, but he really wanted to liberate it and play with the concepts of Star Wars the way that Lucas himself had. And obviously, he wasn't allowed to create an insane clone of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Which I would have loved, because I remember hearing that and then seeing the book cover and going, that's the insane clone Obi-Wan. Because he was like long beard and with like lasers.
How did you hear about it before? Were you subscribed to Bantha Tracks or something? Did you hear about it?
Well, there was the rumor for many years that he was a clone called Obi-Wan.
Exactly, Obi-Wan.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that went to. I mean, I had no idea how that got started.
I think a lot of this that your book crystallizes what is true and isn't true. So much of it was just sort of like the street network of early Wikipedia of just sort of rumors. Like some of this is true, but then some other editors have come in on the street and told your buddy that this, and then that gets passed around.
Yeah. I'm sure that a lot of Star Wars was created not just in Lucas's head, but in all of our heads. When we watch the original movie and we see things like that slight moment of hesitation in Alec Guinness's gaze when he's telling Luke about his father.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe that wasn't something that Lucas was going for in the direction, because we know he didn't really direct his actors to do anything. But you see it in that, but you see it more if you watch it 4 or 5 times in a row.
Yeah.
You're like,
love that.
Something else, Uncle Owen doesn't want him to be like his father. That's what he's afraid of. What does that mean? Well, it didn't really mean that much at the time, but
I think that's just good acting on Alec Guinness's part.
Amazing.
He's doing, the backstory. He's giving himself something, tangible, I guess, in his mind.
Yeah. He's not just trying to remember his line.
No.
He's consistently shifty, which is great. I really love it. It's very consistent over all the interpretations of Obi-Wan. He's always got that moment of maybe. I'm going to leave myself a little open.
Yeah, absolutely.
You, Joseph, when you first read this book, what did you take away that you loved it so much?
I think it helped me to embrace, Star Wars is a mess. I'm a Doctor Who fan, and I think that is one of the things that had been different about Doctor Who from Star Wars and Star Trek is that fans used to kind of try to super control Star Trek.
Yeah.
Same thing with Star Wars with like the prequel hate, and then Doctor Who has always been a wobbly mess. That's a part of its charm of it's a show about time travel where it's going to break its own rules constantly. In kind of starting to look at Star Wars more from that perspective, where I can love parts, I can love to hate parts. I can just reflect on parts that this part doesn't go with that part, but they're from different views. So there was that. I also think like a huge gift of this book is going to be accidental writing advice for a lot of people who read it. For me, the image of the table in particular, which I'd never heard about that Lucas had this very sort of
door desk
ceremonial table, and like what a great sort of almost Freudian like this could open or this could close. It's a door, and like what is that's a great image of, and that big oak that you describe or whatever kind of wood it was. But just the idea of this is how much work writing really is.
Yeah. So we should explain that in his writing tower in San Anselmo, he's buying up so many houses around his estate that he's just getting this ever larger estate, and eventually he will own all of San Anselmo. But for now I think he's only got a third of it. But no, right at the center of that, he reconstructed this Victorian mansion that he bought with his American graffiti money, and he reconstructed this writing tower, and he built these door desks. And there are several videos where you can actually go inside, and like the one where you see him starting to write episode 1 in there. And
November 1st, 1994, right?
Yes, just before the election. I love it. I love that moment of him starting to write and just sort of falteringly writing on those door desks on his legal pads, because we've all been there. I think we've all started to scribble. We've got this great idea for a space opera.
Yeah.
And we're just, it's all in my head, and I could just see it so clearly, and you start to write it down, and you're like,
that didn't come out right.
Yeah, and the sentences are like glue, and it's just sort of, you're like, oh, this sounds so crass. And that's exactly what he did.
You phrased it very well when you're describing the process when he started creating it, when he's like throwing some names out there. He had like Han Solo or this old guy, old General Luke Skywalker, and you even put a note like, it'd be easy as a fan to yell, "Stop right there, George, you have it."
No, those names. No,
But he went to your left, right there.
And then he's like Emperor Xerxes the 19th.
Yeah.
and it's set in the 33rd century initially for a long time and everything. One of the things, you go into a lot of stuff with fans. You spent time with the 501st and their fascinating story. You spent time breaking down the prequels, which we want to talk about, of course, here. But why do you think we Star Wars fans are such a whiny and spoiled bunch? We are. But it's part of the admission to the club.
It is the Apple fandom of the movie world. It really is.
It really is.
It's because you expect perfection, because you've been given perfection.
Yeah.
And so you expect that going forward. Or you've been given something so close that you cannot tell the difference between that and perfection.
So episode 1's that iTunes update that you're like, why?
What? Come on.
Well, it's so funny, too. I think that the fans have taken it that it's our movie. And what I think we all need to know, I'm talking to you, Mark, is it's George Lucas's movie.
Yeah.
He can do what he wants with it. So that's where it's almost like in your last, we won't talk about it now, but when I finished your book, I was like, okay, he's right. I'm going to enjoy the prequels for what they are. There's going to be certain things that I like, certain things that I don't, but that's not my movie. Just get on board and enjoy it if you want to.
Yeah.
So,
but also, I mean, something I definitely wanted to get across is this notion that Star Wars was increasingly something outside of Lucas.
Yeah.
I mean, he often talked about it in this terms, that it was something that threw him up against a wall, beat him around.
Yeah.
Star Wars starts to sound like an abusive spouse.
Yeah.
Very much, the way that he can't get away. He thinks he keeps getting out, but he keeps getting pulled back in. Very, very abusive pattern of behavior there. He keeps returning to it. And I love that idea that a work of fiction can start to become something of its own. And now it is, at the end of this book and where we are now, it has passed out of the hands of Lucas. The torch has been passed to J.J. Abrams, who will pass it on pretty much immediately. And it's sort of, but it's the idea is this solid thing that goes beyond the life of any one mortal.
Yeah, and I gotta imagine it was frustrating, especially the prequel backlash where George probably just like, come on, what do you want from me? I gave you this. Like, who cares what you think? I'm sure he was frustrated a lot through that process.
I mean, you can see him sort of trying to calibrate the prequels to make them funnier.
Yeah.
Because they were so inherently dark.
Sure.
And
Sith,
we're all
definitely.
like, no, give us dark.
Yeah.
Right.
But he's not like, no, kids. And he had kids of his own at the time. So he's like, he's very sensitive to that. I mean, he had, Jet Lucas was born in 1992, 93. So he's like 4 or 5 years old at the time that Lucas is starting to write the prequels. So he's like, well, no, this has to be accessible to the young kids as well. We've got to have the Jar Jar. And Jar Jar is hilarious to kids under 8, right? You forget this.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's trying to appeal to everyone. You cannot possibly do that. So, he's like, screw this. This was for the kids to begin with. So.
Well, that was what the interesting thing when Ken, he basically said 3 words. There's a Star Wars book, and I got to eat it up and read this. But you go into so much depth about the making of New Hope, and the people that came in to help him kind of rewrite even the crawl, which was so interesting to me, and then to look at the prequels and to see him write this elusive first draft that might be on the internet that I now want to read that was a lot better. But do you think that if he would have welcomed in some of those filmmakers, because I know you touch on it a little bit, but he went, oh, those are your thoughts? No, I'm going to do it this way anyways. But we would have gotten different prequels.
I think he knew he was in trouble, and he knew that Kasdan could have bailed him out.
Yeah.
Kasdan didn't want to touch it with a barge pole. He was like, no, this has to be your vision. So I think obviously it would have benefited from that. Obviously the original trilogy benefited from that tremendously. The more feedback that you have, the more ideas bouncing around, the better. And Star Wars has always been about that. It's always been about taking the best craftsmen in the industry and sticking them together in a room. And I think that's what we're now getting back to with The Force Awakens, right?
Yeah, that was my...
We hope.
Yeah.
We hope. And
absolutely.
it seems like Lucas, with the Clone Wars particularly, when he finds someone like Filoni that he can hand it off to, it seems like maybe he finally found some confidence and to let others the fan generation step forward.
Yeah, he really seems to have had a whale of a time being the EP on Clone Wars, and just sort of coming in once or twice a week, shooting the shit with the writers around a big table. Filoni there apparently always sketching wolves, seeing if he can get it into the show, showing George like Ahsoka on the back of a wolf. Yeah. And George's like, no. But yeah, he really dug that. I'm so sad that Underworld never happened, the Lost TV show.
Yeah.
Because I think he would have had a whale of a time on that as well. But it seems that, from talking to insiders who were working on this, that he was really hampered by his desire to just have like pod races in every episode of Underworld, which just drove the budget way up, and he wouldn't compromise on that. And Rick McCallum's there going, no, let's do it like The Godfather, let's do it like Deadwood in space, let's be all moody and
That sounds cool.
George.
yeah, pod races.
Yeah, Boba Fett? No, pod races. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how we had you on for the great episode of defending the prequels, but you have a chapter in the book about the prequels, or how I learned to stop worrying and enjoy them. But how did you get to that point with the prequels? I'm wondering if you guys have a connective thread on how you just came to appreciate them.
Yeah, I mean, I came at it as just enjoying them because they were Star Wars. And I saw Phantom Menace and had the normal experience that everybody did, and had that moment, particularly in the theater, where I realized about halfway through, I think I'm bored. And I did not know that was possible. But I was so caught up in what you describe in the book of the world around the thing. And the joy of reconnecting to my youth by, going to Taco Bell and, eating some disgusting gordita because I'm going to get a coin. And just sort of the fun of that weird real-life meta experience of this universe. So I really enjoyed them, and I went to every midnight showing, and I thought they got better. And I got sick of just all of the easy go-to jokes and not being able to discuss them at all, ever with anybody, because it was just they're bad, period.
Yeah, the shorthand, a societal shorthand developed. That prequels bad.
Yeah, so it made me interested in exploring what's good about them, and also reflecting on, I know they're technically bad, but I still enjoy watching them. So there has to be something there. I think about them and I'm compelled, so there must be something.
And it is a return to this galaxy. I mean, we think about the stuff we get to see for the first time. We get to see Coruscant.
Yeah.
We get to see real lightsaber battles.
Yeah.
We get to see Yoda in action. And it gets to be more fun. And it gets to actually, it reveals... Star Wars reveals itself as the Flash Gordon fan fiction that it was to begin with.
It boils down to that, huh?
Yeah.
George was just writing Flash Gordon fan fiction.
Just loved Flash Gordon so much and was so inspired by it. And when you watch Flash Gordon, you sort of have to let it wash over you. And I'm talking about the original 1930s serials, the 3 serials, and the Buck Rogers that is often considered a fourth. You sort of have to watch that in the same frame of mind of the prequels. Don't go in expecting Shakespeare.
Yeah.
It's just fun.
That's a good point. And I think it did succeed in that you're whisked back to that galaxy. You are a kid again. I mean, I waited in line like everybody did for Phantom Menace. I then went back and waited in line again just to make sure I saw what I saw.
I saw it 7 times trying to convince
myself. I saw it 4 times and kind of had Joseph, you're the same. I think I'm bored. And then coming back around to it being like, well, every time you put it in and you get the crawl and the music and the lightsabers and just I have a bad feeling about this, you're still there, but in a different way.
And one of the things I like about the current legacy of it is Disney is taking over is, there's been discussion amongst fans about no prequel stuff. They're going back to the basics. They're going back to the classic. And then all this prequel information pops up that people have, even people who claim they hate the prequels, have just quietly accepted as part of the canon. The way that ideas of Padawan are thrown around, mentions of the clones and other events that happened. Everybody's like, oh yeah, that's part of the canon. The same people who in the same breath be like, Phantom Menace.
I know, it's funny. People, I mean, the casual audience will still throw out a quote from the prequels every now and again. They'll probably go for the, fear as the path of fear leads to anger, leads to suffering.
I usually just go sand.
Yeah, that's
everywhere.
I hate sand. It gets everywhere.
Well, when the Force Awakens trailer pops up and Daisy Ridley's character is near discarded pod racers.
Yeah.
I went, hey, pod racers! Oh, wait, I'm not supposed... Oh, wait.
But I think it would be an injustice not to include prequel stuff in the new... You have to. It's canon. There are great things, as we said. We can all pick something that we like, but I would love to see a reference to maybe an old Jedi that was in the prequels, or I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't even hate it. No, they might hate me for this, but if a Gungan walks by, maybe not center stage, but just you're in the world.
Mark Reilly has been fired from Jedi Alliance.
I'll see myself out.
No, even if Luke Skywalker says the words Darth Maul,
right?
You hear Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill say something from there and connect it like that, it would kind of be a surreal. But they're there.
There have been rumblings in the fan theories that there's going to be some connective tissue between Rebels and Episode 7, right?
Oh, wonderful.
Sure.
Yeah. What is Max von Sydow's character? Who is he? Is he Kanan? Is he Ezra? Is he this? Is he that? Yeah.
According to a new rumor, which is ridiculous, he's something else, which I don't like at all. But I'm not going
He's Salacious B. Crumb.
He is
who
Salacious
survived.
Crumb.
Yeah. And grew quite a bit as well.
But also, I mean, it's another interesting thing we should note is when Lucasfilm announced that they were wiping over the expanded universe. It wasn't just, hey, we're wiping over everything after Return of the Jedi, which they could have done.
Yeah.
There could have been a less drastic amputation. But they've also, it's everything except the 6 movies and Clone Wars and Rebels, right?
Yeah.
And everything else going forward. But that leaves open the possibility of a sort of a new take on the Old Republic era.
Yeah.
And the Awakening is something that harkens back to a slightly different vision of the past.
I believe, and I've tried to avoid spoilers as much as possible, I believe there's going to be some kind of Darth Bane stuff there. I believe there's something going to be there.
Yeah, because Darth Bane is of course canon, because he appears briefly in Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And so is Plagueis. I mean, he was mentioned in Revenge of the Sith,
which is one of my favorite books.
Chris, do you think in all your research, which is something that, God, I could have a million questions on how you got your hands on all this and how you got it all organized into this thing. Yeah, of course. I'm sure you didn't. But in talking to the Old Republic, a lot of the fans talk about Darth Bane and the Old Republic stories. I know that you can't really call maybe Knights of the Old Republic the video game canon, but are we going to get one of those movies or a TV show or something that goes back there, in your opinion?
I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at how the Old Republic came in and for a lot of people really saved the franchise.
Yes.
Immediately after Attack of the Clones, when a lot of people were feeling very low about what they'd sign up for, and then this amazing immersive world comes along to your Xbox, and you're like, whoa, this is what I was missing.
Yeah, right.
I think that opened up a new vista for a lot of people, and I hope that there is a recognition in Lucasfilm, and I think there is, because I think people like Leland Chi and Pablo Hidalgo are at the controls here in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
that is fertile ground to be mined for a future spin-off.
Gotta be.
And spin-offs, it's so I'm going to use a favorite English word, dodgy. It's so dodgy to approach a spin-off about a Boba Fett or a Han Solo, because you are going to create so much fan angst there.
Yeah.
But a spin-off that takes you 10,000 years earlier.
Yeah. I loved one of the rumors that proved to be untrue, which is Zack Snyder was doing like a 7 Samurai Old Republic movie that might have been a spin-off, or maybe a complete new trilogy. I love that idea. I don't think Zack Snyder's doing it. Of course, he's at DC now, but I could see that happening. Absolutely.
Yeah, there may be a grain of truth to that.
Where there's smoke, there's fire sometimes. I mean, there might be people talking.
You pay $4 billion for this franchise, you're going to explore more than just one small, 1 century worth of the history of it.
Yeah.
In the time we have remaining here, I want to talk a little bit about, Jonathan, we might go a little overtime here. I apologize. I'll fight Phil later. In the time we have remaining, I want to talk about some of the nuts and bolts of actually writing this book. And like on Thursday on the Schmo Show, I asked you, like, how did you get Kurtz? Because it's not a voice you hear about a lot lately from the Star Wars. How did you actually go about tracking down and getting some of these people to open up and talk about this?
You just write them, wherever you can find them, and slowly you start to build up a clip reel, if you will, of people you've already talked to. So you're like, oh, okay, this is this is serious.
This guy's good. You can talk to him.
You're safe.
yeah, exactly. So that sort of slowly starts to build up, I mean, ideally, I'd like to follow what Bob Woodward, famous journalist, talks about whenever he writes a book, because he tends to write about presidents and power in the White House, and he's always like, well, you start at the outer circle, and then you slowly start to work your way in. By the time you've got to the guy at the top of the White House, you've talked to everyone else. So he's like, well, I guess, I'd better give you my
take
perspective. And that didn't quite work with the guy at the top of Star Wars. The guy who's retired from the top of Star Wars because A, he doesn't want to talk about it anymore, and B, he doesn't want to talk to anyone who's not Lucasfilm.
And he was burnt by that 82.
He was burned by skywalking, and we talked a bit about that on Schmoes. But yeah, it was just a slow process of talking to people and reading everything I could read and thinking about it. I think it's essential to start writing early. In any project like this, just to get your own thoughts straight. Because then you can build upon that layer upon layer. Lucas, we've talked about this, about how Lucas likes to write his drafts as fast as possible by pencil. He's talked about it like it's playing jazz,
faster and more intense.
Then just faster and more intense, and then just go back to the beginning and do it again. And I think he learned that from many years of painfully bashing out the draft. I didn't quite do it that fast, but there was definitely a lot of reiteration of each chapter as I went through it, as I got new interviews. As I found new stuff, and there was definitely a moment at some point where I'm just like, a little bit like Neo in the Matrix, like I know kung fu. Where you're just I have a handle on all of this. I have a sort of a working theory, an overarching theory of the whole thing. Several handles, as it happened. They just kept popping out. But
I can't imagine, but that you had the chapter order in your head. It must be that it all came into place towards the end of this, because I think it absolutely sets the tone of this book as a story in my mind, almost not fiction. I know we're talking nonfiction here, but you took me on a journey. So the beginning with the Navajo and dubbing over Star Wars for the Navajo language, which was so fascinating to me, which seemed to be the whole kind of through line almost. How did you get that idea to start there?
Well, so there were a few press reports about that. It was sort of not a huge deal, but I saw the stories about it before it happened. It happened on July the 4th, 2013. I was like, okay, I'm going, I'm taking the time off. I'm going out there. I call up the Navajo Nation Museum. I get the director on the phone. Manny, he's in the book. He's a great character. We started talking about the whole project, and he really is as relaxed and as
he sounds,
bodacious a guy as he comes across in the book. And then I just went out there. And I was like, okay, I got to find someone. I got to find an elder of the tribe, and so that set me off on that journey. But there was a lot of reassembly of the book. I mean, initially I opened with the 501st Legion. My editor was like, no, the Navajo's stronger. It's a stronger chapter, so you reorder it. There are missing chapters. I mean, there was a chapter on Star Wars and space travel. Sort of gets squished into the final chapter there. Star Wars and politics, you've probably seen that. That sort of gets spread out throughout the book. So it's a long process with something like this, and I can't remember who it was. Hemingway who said, "Well, writing is rewriting," but that's really true.
At what point did you choose, was it your choice to immerse yourself, like for the lightsaber fighting technique? You could have just observed instead of trying to do it, right?
Well, stuff like that. I'm just like, well, on the one hand, I could just write about this lightsaber class as if I'm not in it, but that wouldn't be any fun. But also it's funnier if I'm in it as a character and I'm sort of flailing around with the lightsaber, and as I was doing that, I realized, okay, well, this is actually a great way to talk about Star Wars Kid. Ghislaine Reza. Yes.
Oh, which was that was a great part of the book, talking about it's essentially the early form of cyberbullying was that poor kid. It didn't bring him fame, brought him scorn, and just to see where I was actually very glad you were able to track him down and get him to talk about it.
Me too.
The golf ball retriever thing. I mean, he literally it's like 90 seconds worth of video, and that poor kid just turned out to be sort of the the first viral video ever, really,
because
in a lot of
you
ways.
said in the book we've all been there.
Yeah.
I used to have my old job. Used to have a flashlight, and I'd pretend it was a stormtrooper gun when I was working graveyards to keep myself awake. You know, even now in the room, I have lightsabers. I might grab one and make a sound every now and then. If someone were to capture it and put it on video, now I'm
Could've been
millions
any
and
of us.
millions of people. It could have been any of us. Yeah, that's the point.
That was the
You
point.
didn't
Yeah.
touch on that quite well.
Yeah, that poor guy. I mean, we've all done it. I used to pick up poster rolls. You know,
Yes.
That was my
the perfect
Uh-huh.
lightsaber imitation. But yeah, I don't think that he doesn't quite fully appreciate that we all saw ourselves in him.
Yeah. It'd be
but
tough.
hopefully as time goes on, as he
Yeah.
matures, he'll realize that. But yeah, I'm glad that he came out and said, I'm taking a stand against cyberbullying. So yeah,
It's needed.
for him.
yeah.
But I thought it was great that you put yourself in the action, not only for the comedy, but I think because it reflects some of the arguments about Star Wars.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely wanted to say that, there are so many people who would approach a book like this as a sort of look at those nerds kind of approach. I mean, that's sort of the default approach that I think we expect in book writing today. I don't want to do that. I think that there's a wide enough audience for this that understands, that would want to do that too, that would want to get inside a Boba Fett costume.
I was going to say, you got to be inside Boba Fett and be a rock star for a day at a convention. Tell us about
cool.
that.
That was for a hefty donation to the Peter Mayhew Get Me Some New Knees Fund. A very generous soul in the Alpine garrison of the 501st Legion loaned me his Boba Fett costume, put me up in it.
Right.
Because for a long time I was like, well, I got to get inside a stormtrooper costume.
Yeah.
Right. And actually that was inspired by there's a book called Disney War, James B. Stewart. And it's all about Michael Eisner.
Oh, yeah.
And there's to my mind, the best chapter in that is when he's Goofy for a day. He just gets inside the Goofy costume and walks around the park and learns how to keep the sweat out of his eyes and how you're supposed to approach kids without frightening them. And
Right.
all of this sort of stuff. And it's really so immediate. And you're like, wow, that gets across what Disney is.
Yeah.
So much faster than if you gave me 3 chapters of very dry prose.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do the same for Star Wars, and being inside a stormtrooper costume was the obvious way to go. But then Boba Fett, I mean, they
gotta do Boba Fett.
I will never forget the 2 stormtroopers walking past, and they're just like, they're grinning and they're pointing. They're like, "Watch out, Boba gets mobbed." And it's true. It's like everyone that wants their picture taken with them.
Yeah.
I think even more so than Vader in a way, would you think? I mean, he's kind of the rock star.
Yeah, you can approach Boba a little more.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
Well, kids seem to be able to.
That's great. What if you can possibly wrap it up, and folks, again, I want you to grab this book if you haven't already. I know a lot of the Schmoes fans have. I started just the other night researching again, thinking of what to ask Chris. I'm halfway through the book again. I've just decided, screw it, we're going to read it again. I finished it like a month ago.
Wow.
But what were some of the biggest things you learned from it, whether it be about Lucas, the Star Wars, the fans? What are some of the takeaways on your journey, other than that you maybe like the prequels a little bit more now, or you like R2, which were big reveals too?
I think that this sort of thing is kind of inherently built into our makeup as a species. I think that we need stories, and we need them to be, I hate the word escapist because it suggests that you're escaping from something.
Right.
But this, what Star Wars showed us is you can escape to something as well. It's the, it's the positive side of, you can take, one point of light in the galaxy, in the sky, and say that's a galaxy that I'm going to write, 40 years worth of material about. And I think that's really what took us there, was this notion that this place, maybe it really existed. For all we know, in this infinite universe, maybe it did. And that gives it more a realistic aspect, I think, than Middle Earth did, or anything like that. So, it was the future and the past in one. It was sword and sorcery, but it was also, cool blasters. And I think that sort of incongruous, it's a lot like what the Beatles did, where they took the old and new and they mashed stuff up randomly, and they would have the TV going in the background. They get random inspiration. And I think that the fun of it is really is the key element on top of all that. It's like you've got the fantasy, you've got the escapism, but you've got to make it fun. And I have a whole chapter about the comedy and the satire that is inherent in Star Wars. And you know, that's what so many science fiction filmmakers forget. Space, good old-fashioned rollicking space fantasy. It doesn't all have to be, you know, scary dark spaceships and an alien chasing you through
Dystopian
corridors.
futures. Yeah.
You know, dystopian. I love the YA dystopian novel Twitter account. You guys have seen that.
I've seen that.
I'm so clumsy. I've dropped my nutrition paste all over my grey tunic.
I gotta follow that one.
Star Wars is inherently fun.
Yes.
And I think even you said Lucas had to remind Filoni about that during the Clone Wars stuff too, right? Hey, have some fun with this.
Yeah, everyone who comes to Lucasfilm sort of, you know, gets this big seriousness injection. They're like, I'm dealing with this big weighty thing, and they have this phrase going around the corridors that I heard from, you know, several former people in the art department. To make Star Wars, you've got to hate Star Wars.
Right.
just Star Wars. Just forget all that stuff going on before. Don't let it drag on your shoulders. Just have fun with it.
Don't worry about those guys that host podcasts and rip apart your Rebels finale. Any final questions for Chris as we wrap it up here, boys?
Oh God, when's the next version?
When's the special edition?
After we get the Disney trilogy. Are we going to get another one? Are you going to revisit? Would you ever revisit again?
Yeah.
I think that's more of a question for me.
Revisit the book.
Well, maybe another version. Maybe it's all about the Disney versions of Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, I do see this as something I'll keep adding to over the years and next editions. I mean, obviously, you know, Rebels hadn't come out when I was writing this.
Sure.
I'd love to write an extra chapter on that. There's actually a UK edition coming out. For,
oh, wow.
I don't know if we
great.
have any British viewers, but
we do.
It's coming out on, guess what date? May the 4th.
Perfect.
May the 4th.
And is there just a whole Shreddies chapter?
Yes. It's all it's all changed. I'm inserting the U's into every time I look color as we speak.
Well, we talk about in Schmoes too that already you can tell, even though it's generally a positive vibe coming out to the public, the making of Force Awakens is going to make one hell of a book.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Because the stuff with Arndt and the Iger say all this stuff, and you touch a lot on. There's great stuff here, guys, about Bob Iger buying the product, but there's already just so much of what's going on behind the scenes.
Oh yeah, you just want to be a fly on the wall. And
we were at the same event at D23, and for 2 years now, running joke on Schmoes in my news segments has been Disney Nature's Bears, because we've tuned in for Star Wars, and we got bears. The bears crap in the wood. You're gonna find out.
And they played the music and everything, got everybody excited, and then
Bears.
Nothing. And it was something's going on.
Star Wars can be anything, even just bears.
He's been bears in the woods.
Maybe throwing out a little bit too much, Disney.
Yeah. Any wrap up from you there, Joseph? I don't want you to close this because you're the man. If without you, Joseph, I might not have found this book.
Well, I have one question for you. Would you write Star Wars fan fiction yourself? Like actually try to create in universe?
Ooh, that's a great question. I sort of, you know, I'd created very elaborate episode 7s, 8s, and 9s with my action figures as a kid, and my lasting regrets are that I didn't write them down.
Yeah.
I know there was something about the Emperor gets cloned, and there's in fact a whole factory of Emperor clones that Luke has to defeat. But I don't know anything about the intricacies of that plot, and I'd love to try and revisit.
If we were to all take our, because we all, I'm sure, I used to dream about being Han Solo's kid in Star Wars Episode 7. Yeah. So, maybe we can put them down on paper, boys.
I know that's actually a great idea. A fan fiction collection of alternate episodes, Episode 7s.
That sounds great.
From
all written by our inner 10-year-olds.
I'm worried, Chris. Did you actually write it down? Because I think Dark Horse stole that idea and made Dark Empire. That's exactly what happens.
Like, hey,
has to. You want to play with your Emperor action figure, but he just died.
But then I discovered Kenna, I think, also wanted to try and do the same thing to save the franchise, save that line. And they also wanted to save Grand Moff Tarkin. They were like, oh no, he escaped from the Death Star at the last minute.
He launched out. What's at a moment of okay, I'll get an escape button.
No, he's a clone.
Chris, we could probably go on talking to you for a very long time. If you were local and didn't live up in the beautiful Northern California area, I'd strap you to that chair and we'd talk and talk and talk. There's so much. Thank you for coming on here. Your book helped me re-find my respect for Lucas as an artist. That sometimes as a spoiled fan, I forget to remember that this guy sat down and created this universe, and he is a successful artist and businessman, and I think that's one of the things I took away from the book. And thanks for the effort you put into this. Is an amazing book. I want all the fans to grab How Star Wars Conquered the Universe. And you boys had the same reaction too, I know.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Without question.
Well, thank you. This has been great. I would love to come back. I'll be back down for Celebration.
We're going to be at Celebration. We'll meet up there. Maybe we'll grab a con hot dog for $14.
Yes.
So before we go today, though, I do want to wrap up something from last week. We're not going to have a full Duel of the Fates segment. Each week we, of course, do our Duel of the Fates. We take 2 things from the Star Wars universe and pit them together. Last week we took 3 things in honor of my beloved co-pilot Maude Garrett moving on. We asked you guys, the fans, what is Maude's best impersonation and impression here on Star Wars. We gave the choice of her Aunt Beru with her Luke. I can't even begin to do it. Luke. Tusken Raider, her Tusken Raider, or TIE Fighter. And I went through this morning and I tracked down the results. And let me tell you, you guys, number one, we know you love and miss Maude. We know that. I do too, which is why my little Chewie sits here forever and ever now. But it was very close for a while. I was like Jeff Probst on Survivor. I'm pulling the votes out of the thing here. TIE Fighter, unfortunately, for Family Garrett, who that's their family voice sound effect they do, only 3 votes for the TIE Fighter.
Wow.
Okay. That's horrible. I've been sick for 2 weeks. I shouldn't do them. The final total is Aunt Beru 46, Tusken Raider 27.
Wow.
But for a while, it was Beru Raider. And then in the around the corner, it just Aunt Beru. Her Aunt Beru, which is uncanny.
It is.
She watched that first time. She breaks out that impression on the show. I do a double take. You're sitting next to me.
Yep.
That is the winner that you guys, the fans of Jedi Alliance, believe Maude Garrett's impression of Aunt Beru calling for Luke to serve him blue milk at the beginning of New Hope is her best impression. Though some said that is the best, but the Tusken Raider was their favorite because of what she put into it.
That was my favorite, Tusken Raider.
So that's this has been another edition of Jedi Alliance. Thank you for listening, folks. We'll be back next week. Joseph Scrimshaw is going to come back. And Joseph, where can they find you, follow you, and what do you got coming up? You got some stuff coming up.
I got a bunch of shows in Los Angeles, and I'm doing a little tour of the West Coast with my friends, the Double Clicks. I will be doing stand-up comedy, and the main things I'll be making jokes about are Star Wars and issues of social justice and how they interact. So it will be a lot of fun. You can find out about that at josephscrimshaw.com and follow me on Twitter at Joseph Scrimshaw.
That's right, and he's got a book, Comedy of Doom, out too, if you want to get that. Mark Reilly, you got Meet the Movie Press here on Fridays. Where else can they follow you?
Meet the Movie Press Friday, and every day on schmoesknow.com. And guys, I also launched a new website, iseethefrog.com, which we look for the overlooked. And today we posted a great Star Wars related post, Weird Al Yankovic singing Yoda song with some autistic children, and it's one of those things you have to see. So if you want to go to iseethefrog.com, you can check that out.
That's right. Of course, you can follow Chris on Twitter at Future Boy.
Yes,
where you are very good at responding, especially when Schmo fans bombard you.
Oh yeah, and they're still doing so, which is great. Keep them coming. I am surprised that I have not got tired of answering Star Wars questions by now, but I have not.
That's a good sign.
That's great.
That's a good sign. You can watch this show and all the past episodes on YouTube, youtube.com, Popcorn Talk Network. Don't forget to follow the other Popcorn Talk shows. We got Profiles, Guilty Movie Pleasures, Box Office Breakdown, Meet the Movie Press with Mark Reilly, Marvel Movie News, DC Movie News, and a lot more shows coming out from the Popcorn Talk Network soon. And don't forget the Schmoes Know main show live every Thursday, 6 p.m. PST with the crews. If you're with the crew, Jedi Alliance on iTunes. If you're there, subscribe, rate, and review. Follow us on Twitter at Jedi_Alliance. Also follow Popcorn Talk and Schmoes Know. Go to schmoesknow.com for all your movie news. This has been Jedi Alliance on the Popcorn Talk Network. We talk movies, and thank you for listening, because many Bothans died to bring us this information. Miss you, Chewie. See you next time.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, Christian Harloff, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.